Welcome back, everyone, and welcome Lisa. Lisa Albro, college coach veteran, is here to talk to me about the ROTC. So pretty excited about that. How you doing, Lisa?
Doing great, Sally. How are you?
I'm doing really well. So I was so clueless about ROTC for most of my career, and I was so grateful when we hired you because you actually knew like a good amount about it. Like I think you presented to us and it was like a revelation. I took down every word you said. So really glad you're here today because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about it. And actually, let's go ahead and start with what is ROTC? Like what is it?
Sure. Reserve Officers Training Corps. It's for students who want to have a college education, a four-year college education, but also give service to the military.
Mhm.
And very often there's a scholarship attached. I can't say that every student gets one. There are students who do ROTC without scholarship as well, but in general, many are scholarship students. So
Mhm.
it's a way to fund college too, but it also has at the tail end of it, when you graduate from college, you have your degree, but then you're also committed to service in the military.
Mhm. And how long is that service typically?
It will vary depending on the specialty, depending on the branch. If you talk to Army, for example, they'll say they want 8 years from you, 4 active and 4 reserve.
Mhm.
Uh, if you're going for Air Force and you want to be a pilot, pilots need to give 10 years. And those are just a couple of examples, but there's so many variations. Nursing, for example, will carry with it a certain commitment of service in different branches. So students who are interested in various branches and various functions in the military really need to study the websites and see what is the service commitment for each
Mhm.
area they want to go into.
Yeah, because it is a serious commitment. I mean, I've talked to families. Well, there was this one family in particular where this one student said, "Well, I want to go to an expensive private school and my parents won't pay for it, so I'll just join the ROTC." And I was like, "Have you do you have any interest in the military? Like setting aside the money,
Mhm,
how are you going to feel about that kind of structure?"
mhm,
And giving your life over to that because this is a very big commitment. This isn't just
right,
like a couple hours a day, even. This is 24 hours a day.
mhm.
Um, and he was like, "Well, I can do it." I'm like,
No.
I'm not saying you can't,
Mhm.
but think about it very carefully. I mean, I think it's a wonderful scholarship, and I'm so glad that our service people have it. But like, don't do it just for that, is what I would say.
Exactly. That's what I say. I think your commitment to service should come first. That
Mm-hmm.
should be the thing that drives you to go into an ROTC program, not the other way around. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
because you are committing to it. Now, granted, you can start in an ROTC program and you have a grace period after which you're not automatically committed to it. There's a time frame where you can decide to opt out,
Mm-hmm.
and after that passes, okay, if you haven't opted out, well, you're kind of in it. You're committing.
Right.
And it amps up, it gets more intense. There are summer programs that they have to do. There might be some, like Air Force, for example, requires a test. There's an actual standardized test they need to take at some point to stay in, and it involves an awful lot. But let me be clear, you still have a traditional four-year college experience too. It's just that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing your ROTC on top of it. There might be, a certain number of hours per week of class meetings and drill instruction and things like that. But by and large, you're still a traditional four-year college student. It's just that sometimes you have your uniform on and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to drill, or you're going to ROTC functions or
Mm-hmm.
classes.
We as you can probably imagine, well, when I was a student at Reed College, we did have one ROTC student, only one. Reed, for those of you who don't know, is a small college in Portland, Oregon, and knowing its location in Portland should tell you a lot about what Reed is like. It's very, very liberal. So people being in the military was very unusual. A student walking around in his military gear was, we all went, "Oh, there's Ben," and so,
Yeah.
but I thought it was great. I mean, I got to know him and become friends with him later, and he talked about how, like, just the sheer diversity of his experience, being in the military, getting to know people there, and then also being out of college like Reed, how valuable it was. So even
Mhm.
if you're not someone who thinks where everybody in your school is going to ROTC, it can be a really positive experience.
Certainly.
So yeah, I just want to make sure that like people think about it. But again, the service comes first.
Right.
The
Service comes
service
first.
100% comes
Yeah.
first.
Absolutely. And I know I've talked about this before when I've been on the show to talk about military academies. If a student is interested in a military academy, it's really smart to also look for colleges to apply to alongside application to military academies that have ROTC programs and to apply to those, because there's no guarantee they're getting into those service academies. They're highly selective. You know, they may not get in. They can't bank on getting admitted to a service academy. So if military service is what their goal is, they ought to also look at the ROTC programs for those branches that they're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, getting into West Point and the Naval Academy is like getting into an Ivy, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
So, all right. So when and how do students apply? How does the application process work? Because like, hopefully everybody knows that it is more complicated than just saying, oh yeah, I'm going to check a box for ROTC. There's more stuff to it than that.
Absolutely. So they have a separate ROTC application, and each branch has its own. So if, let's say, there's a student who wants both Army and Navy, or can't decide, or would be happy with either, let's just say, occasionally that happens, they need to look at, okay, which colleges, first of all, have the ROTC programs and the branches they're interested in, but then also, you know, they have to fill out the ROTC application for those branches. So each one has its own website. You could, I mean, you could simply do a web search and say Army ROTC or Navy ROTC, but I actually have the websites, and they're a little bit involved, but I can give them to you now or later if you'd like. You know, www.goarmy.com/ROTC is for the Army. There's the Navy is www.navy.com/joining/college-options/NROTC. Like I said, it's easier just to Google it. Here's the easiest one. Air Force. Air Force is www.afrotc.com. Simple, right? That's a little bit more intuitive. So on each of those sites, they can read up on all the stipulations about applying. Now, the application process varies in time frame too. Usually it's at the end of the junior year, either the spring of the junior year or the summer after junior year going into senior year, that they can actually access the applications. Right now, the only one that's live is Navy. Navy's went live on April 1st of this year. Army's won't go live until June 12th. And Air Force goes live on July 1st. And so they can actually access those applications as soon as that. So what I'd encourage students to do is find out which schools offer ROTC in the branches that they're interested in, and then also go to the ROTC application, because there are a lot of steps to that. Just like when they apply to colleges, they have to submit their high school transcript and letters of recommendation and test scores and report on their extracurriculars. That all has to happen as part of the ROTC applications as well. So students should think of this as another college application, essentially, that they're filling out. But in addition, beyond what they would do for a normal college application, there's a physical fitness test they'll have to take. There's a medical exam they'll have to do, and there's usually an interview as well. So there's some added components to this. So that's why starting early, as soon as the application opens up, is a really wise idea, even if they're not sure of all the schools they're applying to. Even if it's a few that they know they're applying to, get that ROTC application in process, because the process of applying takes time with all the things you have to schedule, the physical fitness tests and the exams and all of that as well.
Yeah. I think if a student isn't an athlete, this might not be as easy for them. That's one basic thing.
I don't know if this is that they have to be an athlete per se, but they need to be physically fit.
Right.
They need to prove physical fitness. And I think some people who aren't necessarily athletes, but they're fit, maybe they exercise frequently. They can run a mile. They can do the things that they have to do to pass the physical fitness test. So you want to make sure you can read up on those websites too, on what the physical fitness test encompasses, the shuttle run and the pull-ups and all the things they have to do. They can start practicing for those things too, well in advance of taking the test, just to ensure that they'll pass that physical fitness test. But also the medical exam, there are things that they can't control there. They either pass it or they don't, based on certain medical issues.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to know. All right. And so how can you be competitive? Like what, I mean, I think a lot of people sort of imagine, or I've heard people say actually, well, I guess this is more actually for the academies. They're like, I
Right.
got a nomination for my congressperson, so I'm in, right? Like they kind of think like I have the GPA,
Right.
so I'm in, right? So, but it's more complicated than that.
It's more complicated than that. I mean, if you look at some of the GPA requirements, each branch has a different one. If you read up, I think Army requires at least a 2.5 GPA, which, okay, I think a great many students have 2.5 or more, but that doesn't mean everyone with a 2.5 gets in. You know, you're
Mm-hmm.
still in competition with students who have 3.5s or
Mm-hmm.
4.0s. And so it's, you know, how competitive are you as an applicant in a pool of many applicants who are also competitive? Not to say that you have to have the highest level, you know, academic standing. You know, you might be in the middle of your class but still have a strong GPA and have some
Mm-hmm.
tough courses and have some good test scores. And if you look at the test score requirements, you know, some of them aren't ridiculously high. I think, and I think it's Army too that says, you know, a 920 or 1,000 on the SAT is really their minimum, but
Mm-hmm.
you want to be over the minimum. You want to be
Right.
over the minimum. You want to know that you've got the good backup of recommendations from teachers, but also remember, getting into the ROTC program or getting the ROTC scholarship, you have to get into the college too. So you're
Mm-hmm.
also applying to those colleges, and you can't just get one and not the other. You've got to have both the offer of admission and the scholarship
Mm-hmm.
offer, if that's
Have
what
you
you're
ever
going for.
heard about some colleges giving preference to people in ROTC?
In terms of admitting them,
Yeah, in terms of admitting them. I mean, it wasn't the case at any of the colleges that I worked for, although it was certainly a plus to have that as an
mhm,
interest, but it wasn't like a
mhm.
big boost. But I've heard people say that too. So I was wondering what you thought.
You know, maybe rarely I've heard of it being an advantage, but I don't think it makes as much of a difference. They're still
Mhm.
looking for admissions is looking for it. It's what it's looking for.
Right.
And if it's below what their standards are, then it's not necessarily going to help
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
Now, some branches will want students to list also their top choices of colleges in order of preference. And so, you know, whether they get the scholarship or not at a college can be determined on that. They can say, okay, this is your first choice, and this is the one we're going to look at you for scholarship, but maybe not for your third choice. And what
Mm.
if you don't get admitted to your first choice, but to your third choice? Do you still want to be in the RTC if you're not getting the scholarship?
Mm. So there's some strategy involved too. I mean, if you put as your first choice a college that you're unlikely to get into,
Mhm.
that might actually backfire on you.
Right. So you want to be smart about what you list as your choices. Be aware of where your chances are with the schools that you're considering as
Hmm.
well.
Okay. All right. Very good to know.
Mhm.
So are there elements of the application that surprise students that you might want to, you know, that you would sort of like warn people about if you were giving them advice? Like, keep in mind, I know we've already gone over some things like
Mhm.
that, but is there anything else?
I think the physical fitness exam or and the medical exam is what tends to surprise students the most. The fact that they, you know, there can be some little thing that throws them off kilter that they won't be. Now, sometimes they can get a waiver if there's, you know, something workable. But yeah, I think, you know, they might check all the boxes. They might have all the things they need grade wise and, you know, even pass the physical fitness test, but something can disqualify them medically. I
Hmm.
think that's always a surprise.
Hmm.
And I actually had that happen to a student a few years ago who was gung ho on ROTC. And she discovered in her medical exam that she had a heart issue that was not, you know, prevalent, and wasn't something that she was aware of until the medical exam.
Oh, how heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking. Yeah.
Oh, oh my God, I feel so badly.
Mhm, mhm.
Oh, I mean, on the other hand, it's, you know, you can't send someone into these situations if they have, you know, such a condition. So,
Right. Right.
yeah.
They need students in top physical condition because it's can be very grueling
Hmm.
what they will be doing as servicemen and women.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, so where, I mean, I guess we've talked about some of this. Are any other places where they can go to get information on all this? Like, is there anything that's sort of ROTC specific?
You know, I've seen a couple of websites about military service. I don't know how much I trust them. I would rather just go to the source. I would say the ROTC websites for each branch tend to
Mhm.
be very comprehensive. You can go down many, many rabbit holes when you are clicking around. I know I keep checking on them every so often to see what's new and what's changed. For example, I was looking for information on testing requirements, given the fact that this past year has been very strange with testing optional high school or
Mhm.
colleges or test free schools. And it's hard to find a lot of literature about that. In some cases, it's calling around. I know military academies are having that issue too, where they're still hoping to see test scores and will be willing to take, at least initially, PSATs for some students to get their applications started. But it's hard to find a lot of that information even right now, and some
Mhm.
updates haven't been made. But there are phone numbers to call. There are contacts that students can also make and reach out to. There's, a little chat they can go into and ask the questions as
Mhm.
well. And so I would just rely on the main websites for the ROTC.
Mhm. Yeah, make sure it's coming from the source, because I can
Mhm,
imagine that there might be some shady stuff out there. So,
mhm. Right.
um, all right. Well, Lisa, this has been so helpful, and I learned some more stuff, which is always a nice thing too.
You can always learn something, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any last words of like who should look at ROTC, or do you kind of feel like it's the sort of thing where students know it? Like if they've always thought about service, then they should look at ROTC.
Yes, but I also tell students, if service is important to you, service in general, service to other human beings.
Hmm.
If you have a deep commitment to leadership, if you've exhibited leadership in your high school years and it's something that you take to fairly naturally, you've met these students that you just
Hmm.
feel are natural leaders. They could be good for ROTC. Maybe they hadn't thought about it before. And students who are thinking, okay, I really want to go to college, but boy, is it going to be expensive. And if service and commitment are part of what they're willing to consider and are serious about, then this could be a good way for them to go. Also,
Hmm.
if they want to travel, I mean, they're going to see lots of places in the world when they're in the service, and
Hmm.
even before, when they're in ROTC programs, when they're doing their summer programs and things, they can go to some very interesting places.
And one of the things I didn't realize in high school is what a broad variety of roles there are in the military. Like you
Yes.
mentioned nursing.
Hmm.
I'm sure nurses, they have to go through the basic training, they need to be able to take care of themselves. But most of what they're doing, I imagine, is nursing people back to health, which is
Yes.
what they would be doing, stateside, so to speak.
Right.
So
Right.
so I think that was really fascinating to me, and something that I like to kind of emphasize, that if you, yeah, with that commitment to service, remember there's a lot of different roles for you.
Yes.
So okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that.
Great to be here.
All right. So we're going to take a short break, and then Abigail Anderson and I will be discussing letters of recommendation.